Welcome back, everybody. This is the Fantasy Philosophers. My name's Dustin. I'm with my co-host here, Patrick. And we are going to continue on with our series here. We're breaking down the NFC Breakout candidates. If you haven't checked it out already, check out our previous two videos. We've already broken down the NFC North and the NFC East. And today we're going to go ahead and jump into the NFC South. So we'll go ahead and get started here. Talking about breakout candidates, those are candidates to outperform their ADP based on where they're being drafted. And to kick us off, Patrick, I am going to talk about the Buccaneers and a running back that I think is going to surprise some people this year, Ronald Jones, otherwise known as Rojo. So I'm what you would call a truther, a stan, whatever you want to call it these days, whatever vernacular you prefer. I am a Rojo. I'm a Rojo stan, a Rojo truther. I've been on the Rojo train since about midway through last year. Started acquiring him where I could, and I'm happy with what I've seen so far. So I already know there's people out there booing, hissing, already might have considered turning this off because a large majority of the people out there just have this view that Rojo is just a dumpster fire, hot trash, don't touch with a 10-foot pole type of player. And I know where that came from. He had a terrible rookie year, a rookie year in which he was 20 years old playing in the NFL. That's right. He's only 21 right now. He'll be 22 next year. So, you know, everyone thinks he was really bad last year. He actually finished as RB25. Okay. And he's being drafted right now as the 36th RB off the board at 111 overall. So already you're looking at a full tier of difference between ADP and where he finished last year. And I'll tell you, last year, he ramped up slowly. He split a lot of carries with Peyton Barber, especially in the beginning of the season. Despite all of that, he had 4.2 yards a carry average last year, averaged 5.1 yards per touch. He was number 2 in the league in attempts per broken tackle at Pro Football Focus with 0.13. Kamara was number 1 with 0.16. So far, some pretty good company. It gets better. Derrick Henry was number 1 last year in creating yards with 1.75 yards created per attempt. Rojo was number 2 with 1.72 yards. So again, we're in some pretty good company. I'm going to throw a few more stats out, and then we're going to talk just a little bit about that rookie they drafted. So last year, rushing, he had 178 attempts for 724 yards and 6 touchdowns. Now, he also had 230 yards removed due to penalties on other teammates. The Bucs were the most heavily penalized league in the team in the league last year. So you clean that up a little bit, and you're already sniffing 1,000 yards. I also expect him to start more games than he did last year. Because, again, Peyton Barber had a majority of the work at the beginning of the season. Okay, so that was just rushing yards. Now, people also have this narrative out there that he's a poor pass catcher, just all around poor in the passing game. Well, last year he had 41 targets for 30 run receptions and only 1 drop. Now, on that, he averaged 10 yards a catch for 309 yards. That was second in the league. That also came out to a 7.7 yards per target average. So better on both fronts than people give him credit for. He's gained some weight this offseason. He's up to 225 pounds. And if you follow him at all on social media, all he's been working on is passing game. So clearly he knows it's an area that he needs to improve, and I would agree. But again, he's going to be 22. He's going into his 3rd season. Bruce Arians has a notoriously difficult system to master, and he's going to be the incumbent with 2 years in the system. He's younger than Keyshawn Vaughn, who just got drafted. So, you know, I'm all in on Rojo, and the Vaughn truthers have assaulted me up and down Twitter for it, and I'm okay with that. You know, everyone talks about Vaughn being an excellent pass catcher, an excellent pass blocker, and yeah, he's a decent pass catching back, but I have a hard time equating Vanderbilt's vanilla offense and college football's non-exotic blitz schemes I have a hard time equating that to him immediately translating into a automatically Tom Brady's going to trust him type of pass blocker. Yes, I get that they took him in the third round. The Bucs also didn't have a fourth round pick, and they needed RB depth because they let Peyton Barber walk. So, do you take a guy who you like, or wait until the fourth round or the fifth round where talent's not nearly as plentiful? So, for me, Ronald Jones going at RB36, I think he is a solid mid-range RB2, and he's going to flash some RB1 upside this year. I think I might even be a little bit conservative there. He might be a high-end RB1. Time will tell, but he's definitely being disrespected where he's going right now, and I think you got to grab him up. He's going in like the 9th round all over the place after Keyshawn Vaughn, which to me is a mistake. I just talked a lot about Rojo. Patrick has been patiently, quietly waiting, so I'm sorry for monopolizing it, but like I said, I'm a Rojo truther. I had to get my take out there. Rojo's my dude. I will plant my flag and die on this hill. I'm ready.
Well said. Well said. I'm gonna go ahead and give Dustin props. They're very. He deserves them. We were discussing a trade in the Dynasty League that we're involved in. And I mean, to be completely honest, I added Rojo as a player that I wanted to receive back from Dustin. Personally, just thinking of him as a throw-in, I admit I fell for the rookie hype here. I was thinking that Rojo was on his way to riding the pine. After going through a friendly debate with Dustin and thinking through everything he said and then doing my own research, of course. Dustin is onto something here, ladies and gentlemen. He really is. So props to you, Dustin. I know I gave you a hard time, so my apologies for that.
No worries, bro.
But major props for standing firm with your feelings about Rojo. So Dustin hit on a lot of the stats. So, I don't think it's necessary for me to repeat what he essentially has already told everyone. But just a few quick things related to Rojo. So at the time that I pulled the ADP, he's going early 10th round. Obviously, his stock seems to have gone down due to the team drafting Keyshawn Vaughn. Interestingly, Keyshawn Vaughn's ADP is mid-8th round. And thinking about Bruce Arians, he does have that history of just appearing to not trust rookie running backs. You consider that along with Tom Brady at the quarterback position. He, when it comes to a rookie, I don't see Tom Brady or Bruce Arians, for that matter, putting up with any rookie mistakes. Maybe Vaughn will surprise us, but considering Rojo has 2 years of pro experience, I absolutely see him getting ample opportunity to take that lead back role within the Bucs system. The Bucs offense, I would expect them to put a bunch of points on the board. When you got, not only Gronk, which of course one of Tom Brady's favorite red zone targets, but you got Chris Godwin, Mike Evans. From what I'm hearing, they're planning on deploying more 2 tight end sets. So we'll see if OJ Howard can get back to where he once was producing. But assuming Rojo maintains that lead back role, as a starting running back for an offense that should be putting points on the board, that's a great outlook for a starting running back for that team. He has the draft capital, was drafted in the 2nd round. He will turn 23 years old in August, which,
my bad.
very interestingly, He is actually 3 months younger than Keyshawn Vaughn. So not only is he younger, he has 2 years of experience, whereas Keyshawn Vaughn has none. And then one other thing I want to mention real quickly, and I apologize, I don't have any sources to cite. But I remember when they drafted Keyshawn Vaughn, and I think Dustin touched on it a little bit. It seemed like a lot of people across the community just had this outlook of Vaughn as being a great receiving running back. And then looking into it, I don't see that. I don't see that at all. Yeah, they needed some running back depth with the departure of Peyton Barber, but when someone like Ronald Jones, yeah, he struggled to begin his career. He did. But he has 2 years pro experience. Everything that I've seen is that, he's working on those areas that he needs to improve on. It seems like the work ethic and the commitment is there. And I see him getting every opportunity to take that lead running back role and run with it. So yeah, I got Rojo as a breakout. I mean, when you can get someone who's expected to be the starting running back for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the early to mid 10th round, how can you really go wrong? That's my breakout. Rojo, Ronald Jones, go get him.
Yeah, we agree. I'm glad you came over to the dark side.
I did.
You might be my first convert. It seems that you are either on the Vaughn side or the Rojo side, and there's no, like, if you like Rojo, you hate Vaughn. If you hate Vaughn, or you love Vaughn, you hate Rojo, and there seems to be no in between. So I'm glad I converted somebody. For what it's worth, I don't hate Vaughn. He had one of the worst offensive lines in college last year, and he still put up some pretty nice numbers. But yeah, Rojo was able to leave college and enter the NFL like 2 full years before Vaughn. They're the same age, so that should tell you something in and of itself. I just think everyone's sleeping on him, and rookie fever's at an all-time high right now. So
that's exactly
let's capitalize on it while we can. Yeah.
Agreed.
For sure.
Absolutely. So moving right along, let's see. Atlanta Falcons, my breakout candidate, Calvin Ridley, ladies and gentlemen. At the time I pulled the ADP data, he was going in the early 5th. So let's talk about Calvin Ridley here. So obviously with Julio Jones, he doesn't seem to be slowing down. And I know you've heard us say in previous episodes, that age 30 mark is when we start getting concerned about players, across all positions for that matter. But Julio Jones really appears to be an exception to that. So obviously you would certainly think that Julio will be drawing coverage from the opposing team's top cornerback. So that, along with the departures of not only Austin Hooper, but probably more importantly, Mohamed Sanu, all of those vacated targets, yeah, Russell Gage is there, but let's not take that leap just yet. So some metrics, again, playerprofiler.com, talking about Calvin Ridley, fantasy points per game. He was ranked number 18. Fantasy points per target, number 17. Touchdowns, ranked 13. And the team he plays for, they were ranked number 1 when it comes to team pass plays per game. So when you're playing in a pass-heavy offense in a dome with Matt Ryan and then Julio Jones lining up across from you, that's a lot of opportunity. It really is. So going back to what I mentioned about Mohamed Sanu, and I didn't really tie in Austin Hooper too much here. I'm going to stay more focused on Sanu. So Sanu was traded after week 7. And then weeks 8 through 14, which did include a bye. So 6 games because Calvin Ridley, unfortunately, he did miss both week 15 and 16 due to injury. But we're going to talk about what he averaged over those 6 games once Mohamed Sanu left. So on average, over 8 targets per game, just over 5.5 receptions per game, just over 82 yards per game, and on average, half a touchdown per game. So in other words, he's scoring a touchdown every other game for you. So if we take that 6-game sample size and project it over a 16-game fantasy football season, let's look and see what he was on pace for. 131 targets, 91 receptions, 1,315 yards, and 8 touchdowns. I believe he did still finish the season with 7. He seems to be someone that just for whatever reason just finds ways to get in the end zone, these first couple of seasons in the league. But, when you're capable of 90 plus receptions and over 1,300 yards, I mean, even without those touchdowns, I mean, we're approaching wide receiver 1 status pretty quickly there. And with the 2 years of experience under his belt, I imagine he's only getting better. Calvin Ridley, to me, in the 5th round is practically a steal. Personally, I might take him in the 4th just to make sure I get him. But that offense, they're going to be chunking the ball all game, every game. And although Julio Jones remains, you better believe it, Calvin Ridley will be just as involved. So Calvin Ridley, breakout candidate, go get him.
Yeah, I like that pick. And there's actually, very recently, a lot of hype surrounding Calvin Ridley. So what made me laugh was when you said you might take him in the 4th round. I was just thinking, like, I'm not sure he's going to stick around in the 5th round come August when, everyone starts really drafting for redraft.
I agree.
Yeah, if you want him, you might have to go get him. I would be interested to see how many of those games where he averaged that, how many of those games Julio was active, just to see if they were both active at the same time and he was putting those numbers up. But those are some impressive numbers. Either way, Julio's not going to be in the league that many more years, I don't think. And Ridley's definitely next in line. Although Julio is one of those players you just ride into the sunset like AP, Adrian Peterson. But yeah, man, good stuff there for Calvin Ridley. My pick for the Falcons is actually tight end Hayden Hurst. So I'm kind of glad that you didn't go into the Hooper portion as far as Hooper leaving, because I'm going to talk about it a little bit. So even when we don't try, we're coordinated. It's nice. So for me, Hayden Hurst, breakout candidate on the Falcons. He is going as tight end 14, around pick 115 or so overall. A lot of people forget this, but Hayden Hurst was actually a first-round draft pick for the Baltimore Ravens. Unfortunately for him, 2 rounds later, they also drafted Mark Andrews. And because of their talents, and this is not to say that Hayden Hurst isn't a good receiver, but because of the talents that they have, Mark Andrews ended up for the Ravens being utilized a lot more as a pass-catching tight end, and Hayden Hurst saw a lot more of the inline blocking work. But when he did get targets, when he did get a chance to be the pass-catching tight end, he flashed. He's got some good metrics. He's a big guy. He's quick. Now he's on the Falcons, and there's no competition on the depth chart at tight end. In fact, I don't even know who their second tight end is off the top of my head right now. So I don't expect any competition for targets in the tight end position. And you already kind of touched on this. That offense throws the ball a lot. Dirk Cutter, the OC, his last few years, he's averaged 610 pass attempts. That's a lot. And because of that, Austin Hooper last year through week 10 was the fantasy tight end one. He fell off a little bit at the end. I think he also saw some injuries. But that is kind of the ceiling I think we're looking at for Hayden Hurst. The defense for Atlanta is still a concern. I expect them to have to score a lot of points to keep up and win some of these games. And I don't think you talked about him yet, but Todd Gurley's now there. So we're talking you probably can't stack the box as much as you'd like, which means you can't play coverage as much as you'd like. So you're going to get more stacked boxes potentially. And that makes the play action game that much deadlier. And tight ends with Hayden Hurst's athletic profile can feast on some seam splitters, some tight end corner routes off of the play action. So I think he is a lock for about 100 targets. He's going as tight end 14, but I think he's easily going to be in consideration for the top 10 tight ends. And if things break his way, I think he might even sniff the top 5. And I've actually recently, since we kind of did this research, seen a few folks in the Twitterverse putting out some tight end rankings. And I'm seeing him get ranked as high as 7 right now. So there's at least a few people out there who might agree with me. But that's it for me. Hayden Hurst, tight end 14. I think he's got easy tight end 10 upside, and he's going late. So if you're like me and you like to wait and grab a bunch of tight ends at the end of the round and have some dart throw lottery pick type of guys, for me, this is a target.
Yeah, I agree. One other quick add-on about Hayden Hurst, it was real interesting when, Austin Hooper more or less just wasn't essentially offered anything that I'm aware of from the Falcons. They were very, very comfortable letting him explore the open market. And yeah, I mean, it seemed like they were perfectly fine with it. And then once he gets signed elsewhere, they go ahead and trade for Hayden Hurst. So it almost seems as if like that was their guy. Like they were waiting, and the second Hooper was gone, they went and got who they wanted. So, I'm not going to say that he's just going to completely replicate what Austin Hooper was doing when healthy last season. But like you said, as a former first round pick, I'm sure he's extremely motivated to prove, that the talent everyone saw was the truth. Was the truth. So,
and I think,
great job.
I haven't looked at their player profilers at all, but I just from watching them, it looks to me that Hayden Hurst is quite a bit more athletic than Austin Hooper. So, potential for yards after catch that maybe Hooper wasn't really making the most of. Some things that I kind of saw maybe here and there. We'll see. But I think, I think he's at least a lock for a ton of targets.
I agree.
Cool. Well, unless you have anything else on the Falcons, I think we can probably move on to the Panthers.
Yep, let's do it.
Perfect. So I've noticed a theme here. I guess I'm the tight end guy. I get excited over tight ends, guys. I'm sorry. I've got another tight end for you here. His name is Ian Thomas. He is going as the tight end 20 at about 136 overall. He, I think, is 22 years old, super young, super athletic. And he is projected to be the starter for the Panthers. So in 2018, he got his first taste of a starting role. And in weeks 13 through 17, because of injury, he was forced to be the tight end for the Panthers. Over that time frame, he was the tight end 6. So for those 4 weeks, he was the 6th highest scoring tight end. That was his first NFL action. right? So since then, he's kind of been relegated back to mostly a backup role behind Greg Olsen, who's no longer there. And in 10 games where he's got over 60% of the snap share, he has 40 receptions for 394 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's pretty good, considering 60% is the threshold. As a starting tight end, he's probably going to be, sniffing 90 plus 100% in some games of the snap share. So he should be out there quite a bit more. Like I said, he's really athletic and still super young. So if we take that 10 games where he got over 60% of the snaps and translate that into a 16-game season, we are looking at 64 receptions for 630 yards and 5 TDs, which would have been good for the tight end 9 last year. He's going as tight end 20. So for me, that's easy upside to smash draft on that late in a draft. And really my only concern is the revamping of this offense, right? So we've got a new head coach in Matt Rule. We got Joe Brady coming in. Teddy Two Gloves, right, is the quarterback. I'm not in love with Teddy, but I also don't hate him. I think he'll be decent, above average, even. So really my only concern is the amount of mouths to feed and everyone just kind of adjusting to this offense, It's not like he's going to have a head start over Robbie Anderson, who just joined the team, because everyone's learning this offense for the first time. He doesn't have any head start as far as offensive knowledge in this system. So really, that's my only concern. I honestly even expect the defense to kind of take a step back a little bit because Luke Kuechly's gone. I know it's just one player, but that's a hell of a player to lose. So I expect them to at least take a little bit of a step back and probably have to put the ball in the air a little more. Now, maybe that translates to a few more touches for Christian McCaffrey in the air, but he can't do it all, right? So they're really talented. McCaffrey, Robbie Anderson, Curtis Samuel, DJ Moore, Ian Thomas will be easily forgotten with all those bigger name value type of names out there. And I think there's a high chance that even defensive teams sleep on him, and he has some nice games for us.
Well said. Well said. I agree, with how deep the tight end position just happens to be this season, and you can just wait on guys such as Ian Thomas. How do you not? The potential's there, We'll see how he's used, but considering where you're drafting him, it appears to be more than likely just a steal at where he's going. So I agree. Great stuff, Dustin. Great stuff.
I mean, unless they completely ignore him in the offense, he's a steal at ADP right now.
I just can't imagine.
He's too athletic.
Yeah, can't imagine. Well done. So my breakout candidate, Curtis Samuel. So at the time that I pulled all the data, he's going in the late 14th. One thing I want to make sure everyone is aware of, not only does he have 3 years now of professional experience, he's currently 23 years old. He will turn 24 come August. But to find a receiver that young that already has 3 years under his belt, it's hard to find. It really is. And I'm seeing all these rookie wide receivers getting drafted ahead of him. I don't just completely count the rookie wide receivers out, but it's so hard making that transition. And when you can get a guy who has second round draft capital in the late 14th, I mean, my goodness. So referring to playerprofiler.com, just to discuss a few metrics for Curtis Samuel, 40-yard dash. He ran a 4.31, which is 100th percentile at his position. And then speed score, this is they assign a premium to 40-yard dash times run by tall, heavy wide receivers. And they do note that any number over 110 is considered extraordinary for a wide receiver. Well, guess what? Curtis Samuel came in at 110.5, 91st percentile. Very impressive. Very
It's good stuff.
impressive. You know, new coaching staff, a rebuilding defense. I anticipate that they're likely playing from behind in most games. So that's a lot of optimism when it comes to the pass game. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. When you just take the talent along with Curtis Samuel's age and the amount of experience he has, plus the situation he's in, going back to the rebuilding defense, for me, that equals out to breakout. Curtis Samuel, go get him.
Yeah, man, you brought up some good points, and I actually have a little bit I'd like to add to it because I absolutely love this pick, and I almost picked him myself. This is another one of my guys. I'm a Curtis Samuel truther. I was all over him last year. He didn't quite have the breakout that I was hoping last year. And honestly, in me, you can't convince me otherwise. It's only because Cam didn't play.
I mean,
if you watch the film,
subpar quarterback play hurts everyone. So for sure,
if you watch the film, Curtis Samuel routinely got open downfield. I mean, multiple times in games, and sometimes he was even getting the targets. Unfortunately, deep targets from Kyle Allen aren't worth much because he can't put them on target. But there's all sorts of stuff floating around Twitter, video compilations of Curtis Samuel just dusting defenders, making them look silly, leaving them way behind, and just quarterback can't get him the ball. So that hopefully changes next year. He also is a league leader. I don't have a specific finish, but he's top 7, I know for sure, in air yards. If you're unfamiliar with air yards, that is the amount of yardage that a receiver is targeted in the air before the ball would have or is finally caught. One of the league leaders in air yards, as well as if you follow Matt Harmon. Last summer, Matt Harmon did a reception perception, which is where he kind of grades all the routes versus man versus zone. And he makes a nice visual. You can see a nice, pretty route tree, and it's red on routes that a receiver struggles with against certain coverage and green on ones that he does well against. Curtis Samuel's whole dang route tree was just green all over, right? He's a good player. He's been a little bit hamstringed last year by quarterback play. Hopefully that's corrected this year. I think really that's the only thing holding him back, man. So I love that pick. Hey, Patrick.
Sorry, muted
got a little
myself
muted
there, ladies
yeah.
and gentlemen. My apologies. But yeah, great points, Dustin. I agree with that as well. Just taking a quick look at some metrics. Yeah, I mean, but real quick, just to take a look at a few more metrics. Total target distance. And to break down what total target distance is, this is total distance traveled by all intended targets, also known as total target depth or total air yards. He had 1,542. Beyond that, what I found was real interesting is when it talks about cushion, the average cushion afforded to Curtis Samuel by his assigned defender on each route, 5.19 yards, which ranked number 3 in the league.
Dude gets open. Kyle Allen just couldn't get him the ball, man.
So that tells me defenders, they're well aware that they've got to respect his speed. He shouldn't have trouble getting open.
He runs great routes too. I mean, like a lot of fast guys, you think, oh, they just run that skinny post. They just run that fly route. I mean, Curtis Samuel can run the route tree, and he can put his foot in the ground and change direction with the best of them.
Agreed. Well said.
Cool.
Well said.
So you want to move on to NOLA, The Big Easy, New Orleans
Yeah,
Saints.
504. Shout
Yeah.
out. Yeah, let's talk about the New Orleans Saints. My breakout candidate, Latavius Murray. And I know what you're probably thinking. He's just a handcuff. And to an extent, yeah. I mean, when Kamara was on the field last season, I will say Murray was still involved minimally. I'll acknowledge that minimally, but he was involved. But let's take a look real quick in the 2 weeks that Kamara was out with injury, weeks 7 and 8. So in week 7, Latavius Murray, 27 rushes, 119 rush yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, 6 targets, 5 receptions, 31 yards. Not too shabby. Week 8, 21 rushes, 102 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown, 12 targets, 9 receptions, 55 receiving yards, 1 receiving touchdown.
That's workhorse volume.
Exactly. So I guess the point I'm getting to is, although you practically have to call him a handcuff at this point, if anything happens to Kamara, Murray has RB1 upside just looking at those 2 weeks. That's how I feel. And this, I try to stay away from narratives as much as I can. It does get hard with some, not so much with others, but let's ask ourselves this. Do the Saints give Murray a bigger role this season to not only preserve Kamara's health, but also make sure that Kamara is fresh for their playoff push? It wouldn't surprise me at all. It wouldn't surprise me one bit. When you got a guy going mid to late 14th round, that although he falls into that handcuff category, he's still used when Kamara's on the field, maybe more so this year than last year. But if anything happens to Kamara, I mean, you essentially hit the lottery there. So with that being said, I will admit it was a little tough for me finding someone from the Saints. It was quite challenging, but looking at where Latavius Murray is going and seeing the production he was able to accomplish those 2 weeks with Kamara out, and then that narrative line of more or less what I've read is Drew Brees more or less was talked out of retirement to come back. I'm thinking that, we know Brees' time in the NFL is limited. Is it just this one more year, maybe 2 more? We'll find out very soon. I think it's safe to say that they are a contender. I'll say it anyway.
For sure.
So depending on who they're matched up with on a given week, if they get out to an early lead, I could absolutely see Latavius Murray, maybe the entire second half just taking over. Again, 14th round, when someone has upside such as Latavius Murray, how do you pass on that? I can't. Latavius Murray, breakout, go get him.
Yeah, man, those are some good points, and I gotta agree. Like going that late, he's got to be like one of the, if not the highest value handcuff out there right now, because we've already seen that if Kamara goes down, Murray gets workhorse type volume, which is for running backs. Honestly, we should covet volume more than anything else, because that's what really is the most determinant factor in scoring high fantasy points as far as points per game, points per season. So, not that we would ever wish injury on anybody, but I don't think Kamara's completed a full season yet. Maybe he did his rookie year. I'm not sure. But either way, I agree that this was a tough roster to find a breakout candidate on. So I can't dislike your Murray pick too much, especially when you look at, like, you're not going to pick Thomas here. Chance of him outperforming ADP pretty slim. Same with Breeze. Cooks is probably right about where he should be going. So when I looked at this roster, two names kind of stuck out to me, and I think they're kind of intertwined. So I'm going to talk a little bit about both of them. But I guess really my pick is Tre'Quan Smith is what I'm trying to say. Wide receiver for the Saints. He's not going drafted in most fantasy drafts right now. And the stats that I have tied to this aren't that great. I'll be the first to say that. So he was drafted the same year as Courtland Sutton and Calvin Ridley. He is tied with Courtland Sutton for second in touchdown receptions over that time. And Ridley only has one more, who's in first. Ridley's in first with one more at 17. Courtland Sutton does not have 17, and neither does Tre'Quan Smith. I don't actually have their numbers here in front of me, but Ridley was first with 17, and these two guys were second. Sorry about that. But that's to say that, he hasn't played nearly as much as Courtland Sutton. He's kind of got a nose for the end zone, it might seem. He does have 14.6 yards per catch. And really, this is his make or break year. If he has another year like he did last year where he kind of does almost nothing, he's probably not long for the league. I liked him when he came in. Reports out of camp his rookie years that he was picking up the game fast, quickly. He was running routes well. He picked up the playbook, but then you just never really saw anything from him. I'm hoping that he's learned maybe a little bit from Thomas, maybe learns a little bit from Sanders. And speaking of Sanders, that was who I was saying this is kind of tied to, right? There's a prime opportunity in this offense for a number 2 wide receiver. And honestly, I think Sanders is the guy, but he's been having some soft tissue injuries the last couple of years. And those are the most common injuries linked to recurring again, right? So because he's already had soft tissue injuries, plus his age, it means that he's at a high probability to have more soft tissue injuries moving forward. So now it's going to come down to roster positional battles because they have a lot of receivers on the squad right now. They've got Maurice Harris, Emmanuel Butler, Tre'Quan Smith, Michael Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders. So he's going to have to win the number 3 spot, but he has the most experience in that offense. He's pretty athletic. Reports have been good about him in training camp. I think maybe we're looking at one of those third year breakouts that we used to see all the time from receivers. And now we just kind of expect him to be good from year one. So maybe Tre'Quan Smith falls into that third year breakout receiver and we're just all overlooking him. Definitely post-hype breakout because the hype is now like a year and a half, 2 years old. And there's not been much hype since. So not the strongest take, I'll be the first to admit. But I wanted to throw someone out there that it made sense, right? Because I just couldn't believe in telling you about Cooks or Thomas or Breeze here or Kamara. So maybe he's more of a dart throw than a breakout candidate. But this roster was tough, and that's what I got, man. Tre'Quan Smith, wide receiver for the Saints. Some things have to go his way, but if they do, there's definite opportunity to way outperform his non-drafted ADP.
Yeah, and I can see that, certainly. I'm definitely jaded when it comes to Tre'Quan Smith because I fell for the hype not once but twice and got burned both times. So I don't see myself having any shares of Tre'Quan Smith. But with that being said, probably since I won't have any shares of him this season, it'll be the season. You know how that stuff goes. So
yeah, I know. That was me with Derrick Henry. I was a Derrick Henry dude every single year until like last year. I was like, nope, he's burned me too many times. And then here we go, Derrick Henry. Happens like that sometimes, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Can't
man.
have all of them. Can't
Yeah,
have all of them.
can't win them all, I guess,
How it
is what they say.
is.
But
Right on.
that wraps up all the teams in the NFC South. Again, really appreciate everyone for listening, giving us feedback, likes, comments, subscriptions. Make sure you check out our Twitter page, Fantasy Philoso One. We'll get that should be down here right now. And yeah, we're gonna move on to the NFC West and join us for that coming up shortly.
Absolutely. Up next, NFC West. But until then, stay tuned. Fantasy Philosophers, episode 4, signing out. See you real soon, everyone.